Alright, so another Antonio Damasio video. And so I'll play what his opening statement was at this conference with the Dalai Lama and His Holiness. You know, it was just kind of funny. And then I'll try to jump to the other parts where Damasio is speaking, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, I'm just not, you know, 2 hours of Dalai Lama getting interpreted. It's just, I just don't think I want to do that. You know, so we'll see how it goes. Play ball.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Your Highness.
Your Highness, yeah, that's what he said. Oh, it's funny. Yeah, so well, I give him credit. At least he didn't do the your whatever holiness.
So let me, since this is a conversation about secular ethics, let me begin with the general perspective on moral or ethical behaviors. As a neurobiologist, I regard them as special cases of social behavior. What makes them special is, in fact, their topic. Matters of great import, such as disease and death, and the attending pain and suffering, health and flourishing, and the attending joy and happiness, truth, lying, justice. But it is the topic.
Well, he didn't get to the hunger part, which would be the important one. Somehow the reason that you need to do the whole thing in the first place, which would be really interesting to get to. Why are you hungry in the first place? Oh, that's right, to replicate a molecule. So he's saying that ethics applies to social organization. You know, so he's basically narrowing it again, as most people like to do, to some sort of relative thing. It's about negotiating within your tribe, and you know, that's the origin or the focus of ethics. And so I'm not saying he's saying that, but he is. That's how he's narrowing how he's going to apply his scientific understanding of the brain, and say that the only thing that's applicable is the brain function relative to hierarchies that are established. And I don't even know if he's going to say anything about hierarchy and alpha maleness and all these other social instruments that fundamentally control our brains. Our brains are controlled by. So I'd say that was kind of vacuous in that the glaring fact of evolution and the biology of our brain is the fact of the difference between maleness and femaleness, the difference between competitive and uncompetitive. I mean, these are incredibly dominant features of our visceral brain function in terms of being social animals. Again, in that context, that we have evolved to be social animals and to create social strength. You know, gangs. It's about gangs. Again, when they say the word social, just put the word gang in there instead, and then you'll sort of understand that yes, it's just about gang warfare instead of individual warfare.
It modifies social behaviors and makes them into moral or ethical behaviors. Then let me allude to a few facts from cognitive neuroscience that I think are relevant to this discussion.
Great.
Fact number one, social emotions, which is one of the main categories of emotion, are natural carriers of moral values and actions. For example, when, as a result of infringing an ethical rule, we react with shame, embarrassment, or guilt, we are in fact inflicting punishment on ourselves. When, for example, as a result of seeing somebody infringe an ethical rule, we react with contempt and indignation, we are, in fact, responding to that violation by inflicting punishment on another. And pretty simple.
Right, so you have two ways to respond to something. Either you acknowledge your defeat or you angrily fight. Yes, okay, we got that.
Similarly, this happens with compassion, whether it is for a physical predicament or a mental predicament, where the emotion of compassion delivers consolation and targeted help. And it happens with admiration, whether it is for a virtuous act or for virtuosity, where in fact we deliver, by our emotional reaction, we deliver rewards.
Right, like nepotism, for example. So he's not going to get into that, but I mean, there's this whole psychology of of appreciation or care that is completely controlled and dominated by this visceral emotional reaction that has nothing to do with the reality. Again, children have the properties of needing care. The your part is not significant rationally.
For those who so behave. Fact number 2, non-human species, and especially mammals, and especially primates within mammals, exhibit social emotions in spades. Examples: compassion for physical predicaments, outrage at injustices in the distribution of rewards. And so it is quite likely that when we talk about social emotions in general, we talk about sets of behaviors and strategies that were planted in the mammalian brain by the genome, even if they can certainly be tuned by learning, especially in humans. Fact number 3.
Right. But tuned is a key word here, right? And where is it going to be tuned by? Should it be tuned by social dogmas and constructs, or should it be tuned by some rational understanding of a rational context that makes it understandable that you can't win at somebody else's expense? Some sort of rational statement that says your sense of victory, you have the gold medal in your hand. Should you be glorified, satisfied, or should you recognize that the expense of you having the gold medal is somebody else does not have it and now must live with defeat, and his family will be degraded and their life will be minimized because he didn't accomplish what you've accomplished. He doesn't possess what you possess. And what's the rational context? Should you live as the emotional animal and feel all proud of yourself? Or should you acknowledge that, man, this was stupid? Yeah.
Adult neurological patients, when they sustain damage through a confined part of their frontal lobe, very specific part, become unable to use social conventions and obey ethical rules, although they retain knowledge about those social conventions and those rules. Worse, when comparable damage occurs in the early years of life, for example in children up to age 3 or 4, it so happens that not only is there a resulting abnormal moral behavior, but the children are unable to learn the conventions and rules to begin with. So, in both adults and children, the most blatant sign outside of their impaired moral behavior is actually a lack of social emotions. That should be food for thought. I don't mean...
Right, so he's just saying that there's obviously, as I would argue also, we are conditioned through our experience in life by the sensations that we feel in those experiences, and that leads to preferences, taste for things. We acquire affirmative attachments and negative, even phobic reactions to other things based on this communication in the brain, the storage in the subconscious of this emotional record. And what happens if this little piece of the brain is broken is that there's no more communication with that part of memory. So they cannot store memories of emotions. They only have thoughts of conceptions. So they can conceive the color red, but they feel no, ooh, it's red. It doesn't have the aggression that you would normally feel when you see the color red, because it would be associated with fire and other things that might burn you or hurt you or harm you. So there's no emotional connection between concepts, and so they have no value flavor. They have no value taint. So red becomes like blue. It could be a very soothing and comforting color, when for most people it is not, because it has proper associations with fire and explosions and all that kind of stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Continuing.
At all that the result of these experiments and studies should tell you that there is a moral center, something like an encapsulated module that is there to give you moral behavior. We know that that's not the case. We know that there is in fact a system of which this area is a part, and we...
Yeah, I mean, I might speculate that there's always usually a way into different, there's connections between your video card and the bus and the CPU, and that this section is like the front of the board, and that's where the communication with the rest of the brain is taking place. And so that section, even though it might not look exactly like an optic nerve, or it might not look like a connector, that is probably the more rudimentary part of the cortex, or the frontal lobe, and that yeah, most of the communication goes through that spot, and so when that spot's wiped out, it's essentially just wiping out a big section of communication. But it's something like that. But whatever, that part doesn't really matter. Why one section of the brain would be critical doesn't matter much.
We know that in normal individuals, learning can influence the operations of that particular region. Still, it is very important to know that it is there, that it is specific, and that this kind of impairment cannot occur with damage anywhere else in the brain. So let me conclude by saying that the goal of moral behaviors is essentially regulatory. We are regulating behavior such that there are benefits to the self or to the nearby kin or to others that are more distant, and the degree of benefit varies tremendously with the different behaviors. For example, in extreme...
Yeah, and there should be, in my opinion, this is where some statement would be made like, but that's the biology, that's what a DNA molecule does. And as intellectuals, we can understand that playing the game as animals is not our objective. Our objective is to play the game as well as possible, not to play the game as lizards or as apes, but to do better than that. To be fully human means you rise above those prejudices and bigotries and do better. But he doesn't say that.
In kin altruism, it may not benefit the self at all directly, but it will benefit for certain the kin and others in the group. Now, the biological function that best captures what is going on in moral behaviors is actually homeostasis. That is, in plain terms, life regulation. And I would like to say that there are two kinds of homeostasis. One that is very basic, the one that is really given by our genome and that ensures the welfare of the self and the welfare of the next of kin, and rarely does it ever go beyond that. But then there's another kind of homeostasis, which I like to call sociocultural homeostasis, and that developed because human brains were able to generate cultures once they were immersed in a collective of other human beings, and through those cultures it was possible to reflect on moral knowledge. It was possible to structure that moral knowledge in such a way that it would result not only to the benefit of the immediate self and the next of kin, but also to many others further away in the larger circle of humanity. In other words,
yeah, so that's a nice way to say it, but it's not quite getting to it, right? Because the word culture is so tied to ethnic, it's so tied to race, it's so tied to specific groups, us versus thems. So again, if you want to talk about the culture of the human species, and then even then we're going to get into these, the subculture hierarchies are going to again pollute, right? The rich are going to say we earned it. We're entitled to it. So, I mean, even if you had something called the human culture, I mean, it's all known throughout the world even, that the haves keep playing the game, that they earned it, that they deserve it.
Ethics is not just about what came naturally, and to begin with, certainly it is about what came naturally through our genomes and our biology. It is also about what cultural humans were able to create, although on the blueprint of one's biology, and were able to agree upon themselves.
Agree upon themselves. So again, it was this value relativism, mimbo, bumbo, jumbo, and I mean, the argument is there's the game is describable. The cost and benefits are understandable. Okay, dying in a diamond mine, being suffocated to death is bad. Wasting resources that would pay that man not to be in that mine or not to be in an unsafe mine is good. I mean, it's neither bad. You don't waste the resources that could mitigate against the suffering of another person. The equations of the game are understandable, and it's not about ever basing it on some sort of these notions of value that aren't functioning based on what is the fundamental value. And the fundamental value is, it isn't so, again, it's not about what you want, it's about the fact that you want. It isn't, what's causing you pain, it's about pain. Well, anyway. Alright, so now the Dolly, whatever, turd ball, bibble babbles, blah 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 blah. Okay, here we go. Here's his response, I think. Yeah, right there. See if we can get that. He's got to play, please.
Limited intelligence or not?
The brain specialist agrees. There's something that we can, I would add, for example, the idea that animals can take care of their progeny, of their children, very, very well, is, of course, quite strong and correct. But we actually know right now something very interesting about that. If you take a kind of rodent known as a prairie vole, I can show you a picture, but don't worry, it looks a little bit like a rat. And if the prairie vole actually has such a complex behavior in terms of how the female prairie vole deals with its pups and deals with the husband, that in fact, once the children are born, not only does the mother take care of the children very carefully, but the father does too. And the prairie vole, male and female, are in fact wed for life, and they don't separate ever. Now we know that this behavior is entirely related to the release of a neuropeptide with the name of oxytocin. And we even know that there is a gene that is in charge of the control of the release of oxytocin, and if you block that gene, all of this behavior falls apart. And in fact, the two prairie voles don't mate for life, and they do not take care of their offspring.
That wasn't exactly terribly interesting. I mean, how's it relevant, right? I mean, the fact that we're all dependent on hormones and chemistry to create, the mechanisms of our desire and attachments. Yeah. But, okay, whatever. Interesting, sort of. Llama, 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 bing, bang, boom. Llama, 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 dama, 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 llama, dama, dama, llama, 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 llama. No, wrong guy. Crazy lawyer guy. Bling, blang, bling, blang, bling, bling, blang, bling, blang, bling. Ah, there we go. He's talking there, I think. Yep, I think it's him.
주두기 브랜드다 dream down dream 뭐십 khadu 뭐십 brand
as part of research, we also need to know how the brain expressions differ between an individual who is lucid dreaming and while maintaining the awareness, as opposed to someone who is simply dreaming without awareness.
And that, if I may respond, it's perfectly possible, it's perfectly within the realm of our research. By the way, I realize that I didn't convince you 20 years ago, and we still have a ways to go. But I said that I didn't convince His Holiness 20 years ago of my point of view, which is perfectly fine, because that's what science exists for, is to test. Yeah.
Science exists to call somebody Your Holiness? Come on, you shouldn't have done that. You should have called them Bud. Hey, Bud. Anyway, see, apparently they had a conference 20 years ago, and, the Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize. Boo, 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 boo. How exciting. for him. Or the Nobel whatever. Frumpy, stupid twat prize. Alright, well, I guess somebody would have to actually watch this thing to find more Damasio, so I'm not going to bother. This isn't exactly the best forum, I don't think. Oh, there's a piece right there, so we'll go there.
Since 100,000 employees, perhaps much more sort of restlessness, much more impact. So that's common sense, if you use common sense. Then third, most important, scientific finding. I heard from scientists, that the constant fear, constant anger, actually very harmful to sustain our immune system. Or more happier, more calm mind, very good sustain these body element.
Yeah, whatever. Prove it. I don't think that's ever been proven. It sounds like a crock of shit, actually. Especially when you're in the real world. In the real world, you gotta fight for your shit, or you're gonna get shit on.
And then also, they say one time, one scientist mentioned 2 mouse, both injured, but one with another the mouse who constantly leaking. Other remain lonely, alone. So the speed of recovery, the other mouse which constantly receive leaking, expression of affection, much more faster recover. So these
yeah, so if you clean the wound, your wound will heal better. Yeah, oh, okay. Durr.
Scientific finding. More calm mind, more positive emotion, your health better, improve. And also, best measure, prevent illness is mind always fresh and clear. Very important.
Yeah, well, again, I just don't see any evidence for that in any kind of rat study or anything. Yeah, it just isn't there.
Method, very important factor for preventive measure. So, regarding promotion of secular ethics, real guru is scientist, not Buddha or not God or not Allah, but these scientists, they actually experiment. Then they found.
Oh, well, this is just insufferable, right? Yes, it's insufferable. Let's see if the scientist actually talks back. Doesn't look it. All right, never mind. Yeah, so this is not the. Yeah, I'm just not going to watch 2 hours of this, nursery school with Your Highness. Yeah, forget it. Anyway, till next time. So forth and whatnot.